In today's video, I might hurt a lot of feelings, but feelings need to hurt so that your body can survive. This is going to seem quite misanthropic and cynical to some, but I do believe it is the truth. The collapse of Western civilization, the scale and magnitude of which will be unlike any other civilizational collapse in history. A great way to conceptualize it is with the analogy of a forest fire. Forest fires are naturally occurring events, and as such, every forest, just like every civilization, ultimately will burn. Forest fires happen because the old growth gets very large and it dies, and it becomes a tinderbox. And the undergrowth cannot grow to its fullest potential while this old growth remains. So nature comes in, lightning storms strike and ignite the standing dead timber, and forests are cleared out. All of the old is replaced with the new, and this cycle goes on and on and on. Human beings in our infinite wisdom decided to build our cities close to the fault lines being the Great Boreal Forest. And as such, wildfire management comes into play. And while we may prevent short-term catastrophe with our wildfire management practices, what we effectively do is create disequilibrium in nature. All forests must burn, okay? All forests eventually burn. This is just a rule of nature. This is something that ultimately happens so that the forest can be replenished once again. Humans intervene to stop that from happening. What this ultimately leads to is much larger conflagrations down the line. This year in Canada, we are seeing forest fires that are on apocalyptic scales. Massive forest fires, the size of some states, the size of some European countries are burning. Just one fire, okay? And the reason for this is multifold. It's ado with some climactic cycles. It's ado with increased temperature and reduced precipitation in some spaces. But in some places, I emphasize some, it is due to the fact that human beings have put fires out for too long. Eventually, nature bats last. Nature gets the upper hand, and a forest fire comes that clears out all of the forests that should have died a long time ago, that human beings and all of our critical infrastructure has been keeping alive. Our methods of forest fighting, the water delivery systems, and forest fire management have been keeping that forest from burning. What's unique to Western civilization, unlike any other civilization that came before, is there's a lot of standing dead timber laying around that just shouldn't be here. And this is where the video gets a little bit misanthropic. There's a lot of people who would not be here were it not for the critical infrastructure. There's a lot of people walking around who would not exist were it not for the systems that were in place to keep them alive. I may in fact be one of those people. We're not going to know until the proverbial shit hits the fan, are we? So I'm not saying this from an elitist point of view that I'm going to be the ones who is going to survive. That's not the purpose of this video. It's to self-aggrandize and to glorify myself as a preparedness-minded individual over top of people who don't prepare. It's to say that in our management of our civilization, we have created a very top-heavy society, top-heavy in the sense of old growth that ought not be there, that is merely being sustained by the intervention, the unnatural intervention of human systems, unlike any other civilization that came before. Technology has endowed us with the ability to sustain life where it ought not be sustained. It's allowed some people to lead lifestyles which are unhealthy and which in any other epoch would surely lead to their demise. But now, try to die in today's society. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. If you are trying to self-delete, there are teams, squadrons of people who will prevent you from doing so. If you are doing and engaging in lifestyle choices which are eroding your health and your mental health, it doesn't matter, because there'll be a doctor, or there'll be a counselor, or there'll be a social services member, or a police officer, or some bureaucratic agent who does their job to try to keep you alive, giving you another chance to get it together once again. Unfortunately, these are the people that would not be around were it not for these systems being in place. The natural order of things bats last. The natural order of things is that some people survive and some die. The natural order is that when that conflagration comes through, whoever's strong enough, whoever is adaptable and flexible enough, will be the ones who bring forth the next generation. And all those trees that should have burned down a long time ago, they're going to get caught up in the fire. So what I'm trying to say is, don't be standing dead timber that's just being kept alive by the system. Do you know how hard it's going to be to survive without the luxuries of modern civilization? Where are you going to get your water? How are you going to store your water? How are you going to purify your water? How are you going to grow your food? The amount of calories that you have to expend just to grow food, the amount of labor and hours in a day that are going to go into you acquiring that which you need for pure sustenance, above and beyond all of the other accessories that you're accustomed to nowadays in life. It's going to take up an inordinate amount of time in your day just to stay alive. It's going to take you 8 to 10 hours a day to do the work just to keep you alive. Never mind the 2 to 3 hours a day that you are going to have to put towards preparing and working towards larger products that are going to keep you alive down the road. And then maybe you'll have an hour at the end of the day to sit back and enjoy your life and take it all in. Do you know how hard it's going to be to acquire, to skin, to butcher your own food? Do you know how hard it's going to be the sole person who's responsible for the security of your family? You are going to be the police. Imagine 24/7 not having the police and knowing that you and only you are responsible for the security of your premises, of the security of your family. You and only you are performing all of the functions that we've offloaded to the bureaucracy right now. Educating your children, maintaining a healthy drinking water supply, ensuring that you have food, ensuring that you have fertilizer to grow your food next year. ensuring that you have animals and that those animals are taken care of. You will be your own hospital. You will be your own doctor. You will be your own electrician. You will have to do all of these things on your own, or at least within your own network or your own communities. You will be solely responsible for your individual survival. And right now, many people are not responsible for their survival. We've offloaded a lot of this responsibility onto government, onto various institutions, corporations, even in the private sector, who manage this aspect of our lives. And thus, these muscles have atrophied for a lot of people. You have to ask yourself, honestly ask yourself this question. If and when, whether it's a slow burn, degradational collapse, or whether it's steep and sudden, we go off the precipice of Western civilization's peak. Whatever the case might be, where are you going to be? Are you going to be the flexible, adaptable, young, green growth? And this has nothing to do with age. Or are you going to be that old growth, that standing dead timber that is relying on the Canadian government to prevent it from burning in a wildfire? There's a lot of standing dead timber around, my friends. And eventually, the reason why Western civilization will be so chaotic in its collapse is for the same reason as why we are having such massive wildfires today. It's simply because, and simply the result of our short-sightedness in letting nature run its course. Unfortunately, you've had a lot of people who have not taken responsibility for themselves for long periods of time that will be purged. And I don't say this maliciously. I don't wish any ill will on anybody. I don't want this to be the case. This just is the case. The Darwinian laws will prevail in the end. This artifice in which we've supplanted the Darwinian rule of law is not guaranteed. It is not fixed. It fluctuates. And as such, everything regresses to the mean. Everything will regress to the natural law. And he who is responsible and who has taken the steps in order to ensure that he is ready to endure such things will have a much greater chance of survival. A lot of survival will come down to circumstance and pure luck. Where were you when X cataclysmic event happened? But if you're one of the fortunate ones, and perhaps unfortunate, depending on the way you look at it, who survive, if you're one of the unfortunate ones who survive, which you probably will be, you will be tasked with being fully responsible for the first time in your life. For the first time in your life. I have this thing I call the 100 to 1 rule. It's 100 times easier to do everything now while the grid is up than when it's down. It's 100 times easier right now for you to stockpile the energy and the resources that you will need to ride out an inevitable disaster that awaits. Because we can only suppress the fires that are encroaching on Western civilization for so long. You can only, eventually fire suppression fails. okay? Eventually, the Fed just runs out of options. Eventually, the wars come to our doorstep. Eventually, the consequences of our environmental mismanagement encroach onto our properties. And ultimately, there's just not enough water to put out the fires that are raging. And that's when civilization collapses. It could be in the form of a biological agent. As we've seen, as we've all been primed in the last 3 years, I do believe that that whole scenario that we've seen in 2020 was just a trial run for the big one that's coming. Because you see, this metaphor applies to everything. There's many people who are reliant on medications who, without those medications, they would not be here. There's many people who are reliant on mental health medications, and without that, they would not be here. There's many people who rely on certain cultural norms and mores in order to keep their self-esteem up high enough so that they don't want to self-delete. And those people are not going to survive when shit hits the fan. But for some of those people, I would say that it might be the best thing that ever happened to them, to have the ultimate awareness that comes with being self-responsible in a survivalist sense. Survivalism is the ultimate self-reflection. Survivalism is the ultimate inventory of who you are and what you're capable of. You really will not know a person until you're in a crisis situation with that person. And not just a short-term crisis situation, but a prolonged one. And it's going to be fascinating to see all these people that we idolize and epitomize in media, in Hollywood, the celebrities. It's going to be interesting to see who these people become. Some may become good, some may become bad. It's going to be interesting to see how a lot of the people who we idolize as being the heroes, you know, like the Schwarzeneggers and the tough guys in the movies, how well would they really fare in this type of scenario that I'm talking about? Because understand that a lot of those people are high up in the pyramid. The higher you are up in the pyramid of things, the longer it is to fall when the shit hits the fan. I used to use this metaphor of a skyscraper. You know, it's a lot further down from the penthouse than it is from the basement or from the first floor. The people who live on the first floor, when there's a fire, they get out first. People who live in the penthouse, they don't last that long. And that's why the elites are terrified of what's coming. And that's why they're all building bunkers and they're all having their own contingency plans. Because they understand that their privilege relies on this house of cards. And the closer you are to the top of that house of cards, well, the more unstable it all becomes. So when you're poor, and this is not to glorify being poor or give poor people a false sense of confidence as to how that would translate into SHTF. I've made that mistake before. It's just to say that the downgrade in the standard of living is going to be a lot more when those celebrities cease to be celebrities and they're just human beings trying to survive. And this is why I say survivalism is the ultimate in self-reflection, and it's the ultimate equalizer. Because when you get those billionaires into that bunker and they cease to be billionaires because those digits, those numbers on a screen that used to represent their wealth that was in the stock market or their banks, that they don't have a tangible real world physical item to represent in their possession, well, then they're just another guy. They're just another guy trying to survive, right? So be self-responsible. Understand that when the fire of Western civilization reaches a point, eventually it will reach a point where the firefighters aren't able to put it out. Right now, they're able to suppress it. It's putting out fires right now. That's what we're doing. Whether it's COVID, whether it's the wars, whether it's the climatic shifts, the environmental shifts, the war with nature in terms of pesticides, herbicides, engineering various things in order to keep the whole thing going and try to maximize efficiency and innovate new solutions to problems that we increasingly make worse. Eventually we lose this war with nature. And when that happens, all the old growth will burn. That's all I have to say, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out. Oh, and this one I'm going to be giving to a friend of mine. This is a Silky Katana Boy. When the inevitable collapse comes, you're going to want more primitive tools. This is a Katana Boy 650. This is the world's finest saw for cutting large pieces of wood, whether that be for the purpose of building a log cabin or firewood. This is incredibly sharp. It's the world's finest, largest hand saw. And I would strongly recommend people get something like this and just have it in your arsenal. It's indispensable. It's lightweight. It's incredibly powerful. It's quiet, much quieter than a chainsaw. It doesn't require a lot of maintenance. These are impulse hardened teeth, and they're just razor sharp. It's tools like this that are going to be required to survive a prolonged grid down situation. Some people will glorify the older tools, but there was a time when, an old buck saw was viewed as a technological innovation that people who wielded axes would have scoffed at. So I don't glorify and try to arrest my development like the Amish might, because it's all technology. Whether it's an axe, a stone tool, or this, the goal is to get technology with the least amount of moving parts that's built to be strong, resilient. These are made in Japan, and they're just wonderful tools. They cut through wood like butter. Everybody who uses one of these is amazed. And I'm going to be giving this one to my buddy Dean today from Arcopia. And it's just something that you need to have around, especially if you have a homestead. Because the time may come when the gasoline runs out. And that's when your chainsaw doesn't work anymore. Even if you have one of those lithium-powered chainsaws, the time will come when the mechanisms on it fail. And when that happens, you're going to need something a bit more primitive and a bit more human-powered. Let me know what you guys think about everything I had to say in the comment section below. And just get ready. Get ready for the world to burn. Sorry to be so dark about it, but you can get one of these things in the description, in the link below, and you can get 10% off. We have many Silky Saws at CanadianPreparedness.com. Go check it out.